Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode podcast from the English Charisma. Have you ever had this strange experience? You're watching a movie in English, you're listening carefully, and suddenly you realize something amazing. You understand almost everything. You understand the jokes, you understand the story, you understand the emotions. For a moment, you think, maybe my English is finally good. Then, just a few hours later, someone asks you a very simple question. Maybe, how was your day? Or, what do you do? And suddenly, everything disappears. Your mind becomes completely silent. The words you knew only a few hours ago are gone. You know exactly what the other person is saying, but when it's your turn to speak, nothing comes out. Maybe you smile, maybe you say, maybe you panic. And later, when you're alone, you remember the perfect answer. Have you ever noticed that? Why does your brain always find the right sentence 30 seconds too late? If you've experienced this, you're not a bad English learner. You're experiencing something that almost every English learner experiences. And the surprising part is this: the problem is probably not your English. The problem is the way your brain has learned to use English. Today, I want to tell you why this happens, because once you understand what's really happening inside your mind, speaking English starts to make much more sense. Let's imagine something together. Imagine you've been studying English for 5 years. You've watched hundreds of YouTube videos, you've memorized vocabulary, you've practiced grammar, you've even finished several English textbooks. You feel ready. One day, you finally travel to another country. You're excited. You've dreamed about this moment for years. Then, during your very first conversation, something unexpected happens. The other person starts speaking. You understand almost every word. Your brain says, "Great, I know this." Then your turn comes, and suddenly your brain changes its behavior. Instead of speaking, it starts searching. It searches for grammar. It searches for vocabulary. It searches for the correct tense. It searches for perfect pronunciation. It's almost like opening hundreds of tiny drawers inside your brain, trying to find one perfect sentence. Meanwhile, the conversation keeps moving. The other person is waiting. Now you become nervous. Your heart beats faster. You start worrying about making mistakes. And the more you worry, the slower your brain becomes. This isn't because you're not intelligent. Actually, many intelligent people experience this even more often because they're trying to create the perfect sentence instead of simply communicating. Think about how children learn their first language. When a child wants water, they don't think about grammar. They don't think about verb tenses. They don't ask themselves if the pronunciation is perfect. They simply want to communicate. That's why children improve so quickly. Their goal isn't perfection. Their goal is connection. But many adult English learners accidentally reverse this process. Instead of thinking, "I want to communicate," they think, "I must not make a mistake." And that single thought changes everything. Because your brain can focus on only a limited number of things at the same time. If most of your attention is spent checking grammar, choosing vocabulary, correcting pronunciation, and worrying about mistakes, there's very little attention left for actually speaking. Imagine trying to drive a car while reading the instruction manual. Technically, you know what to do, but you're thinking about every tiny movement: which pedal, how much pressure, when should I turn, where should I look? Driving feels impossible. Now think about an experienced driver. They aren't thinking about every action. Their brain has already connected everything together. Speaking English works exactly the same way. The goal isn't to know more rules. The goal is to make English automatic. And here's something that surprises many learners. Understanding English and speaking English are actually two different skills. You can become very good at one without becoming good at the other. And that's exactly where most learners get stuck. Now, here's a question that almost nobody asks. If you can understand English, why can't your mouth produce it? It sounds strange, doesn't it? But think about this. Have you ever watched someone play the piano? Maybe they played a beautiful song. Maybe you understood exactly what they were doing. You could even explain it. They're using both hands. They're following the rhythm. They're pressing these keys. But could you sit down and play the same song? Probably not, because watching and performing are completely different skills. English works the same way. Listening trains recognition. Speaking trains production. They're connected, but they're not identical. And this is where many learners accidentally fool themselves. They spend hundreds of hours consuming English, videos, movies, podcasts, series, songs, books, and all of that is incredibly valuable. But here's the problem. Your brain becomes excellent at recognizing English without becoming comfortable producing it. Imagine going to the gym. Every day, you watch people lift weights. You learn the names of every exercise. You memorize perfect technique. You understand how muscles grow. But you never actually lift anything yourself. Would you become stronger? Of course not. Knowledge is important. Practice creates ability. The same principle applies to speaking. Your brain doesn't become fluent because it understands. It becomes fluent because it repeats, because it predicts, because it makes mistakes, because it slowly stops translating. And this brings us to one of the biggest hidden problems: translation. Most learners don't even realize they're translating because it happens so fast. Someone asks a simple question, the sound enters your ears, your brain converts it into your native language, then it searches for an answer. It builds that answer in your native language. Then it tries to convert everything back into English. Imagine doing that in a real conversation. No wonder speaking feels slow. Native speakers don't travel through another language. They connect ideas directly to English. When they hear the word coffee, they don't imagine another language first. The idea appears instantly. That's why conversations feel effortless. The good news is, your brain can learn this too, but not by memorizing longer vocabulary lists. It learns by creating direct connections. Here's a simple experiment. Right now, don't translate this sentence. Just imagine it. A little yellow dog is sleeping under a tree on a sunny afternoon. Did you notice something? You probably didn't translate every word. Your brain created a picture. That's exactly how language becomes natural. Pictures, ideas, feelings, not translations. Now, imagine doing that every time you learn a new word. Instead of translating the word apple, see an apple. Instead of translating rain, imagine standing outside while rain falls. Instead of translating hungry, remember the feeling in your stomach before lunch. Your brain remembers experiences much better than translations. And there's another mistake that quietly slows down almost every learner: trying to sound perfect. Perfection feels safe. It feels professional. It feels intelligent. But in real conversations, perfection often creates hesitation. Think about your own language. Do you always speak perfectly? Of course not. Sometimes you pause. Sometimes you repeat yourself. Sometimes you change your sentence halfway through. Sometimes you use the wrong word, and nobody cares. Conversation isn't a grammar exam, it's communication. Native speakers make mistakes every single day. They forget words, they restart sentences, they change their minds while speaking. The difference is they keep talking. Many learners stop talking the moment they notice a mistake. But every pause teaches the brain one dangerous lesson. Speaking is risky. Over time, your brain starts protecting you. How? By staying silent. Silence feels safer than making a mistake. And little by little, confidence disappears. But confidence doesn't come before speaking. Confidence comes because of speaking. Not after perfection, not after another textbook, not after memorizing another 1,000 words. Confidence grows from experience, from surviving conversations, from realizing I made a mistake and nothing bad happened. That's the moment everything begins to change. So, if understanding English and speaking English are different skills, how do you actually become a confident speaker? The answer is surprisingly simple. Stop treating English like a school subject and start treating it like a real language. Think about how you learned your first language. Nobody handed you a grammar book when you were 2 years old. Nobody asked you to memorize 50 words before breakfast. You learned by hearing the same phrases again and again. You copied them. You repeated them. You used them in real situations. Little by little, your brain stopped thinking about the language. It simply started using it. The same process works for English. Your brain doesn't need more information, it needs more repetition in realistic situations. Here's something I'd like you to try after this podcast. Choose just one sentence. Not 20, not 50, just one. For example, I'm not sure. Now don't just read it once. Imagine yourself saying it to a friend. Say it while walking. Say it while making coffee. Say it while driving. Say it with different emotions. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. After a few days, something interesting happens. You won't remember the sentence, you'll own it. That's the difference between studying English and living English. The same idea works with questions. Instead of memorizing random vocabulary, practice answers to questions people actually ask. What do you do? Where are you from? What did you do today? What are your plans this weekend? The goal isn't to create perfect answers. The goal is to answer without translating, without stopping, without searching, even if your answer is simple. Simple English spoken confidently is far more powerful than perfect English trapped inside your head. And here's one more thing that many learners never realize. Fluent speakers aren't necessarily people with the biggest vocabulary. They're people who can use ordinary words quickly, comfortably, and naturally. Think about your own language. You probably don't use complicated words every day. You use familiar words over and over again. Fluency isn't about knowing more. It's about accessing what you already know. So the next time you can't remember a difficult word, don't panic. Use an easier one. Keep the conversation moving. Your listener cares much more about understanding you than being impressed by your vocabulary. Remember, communication always comes before perfection. And before we finish, I want you to remember one sentence, a sentence that completely changed the way I think about learning languages. Your brain doesn't learn to speak by thinking, it learns to speak by speaking. Every conversation, every mistake, every awkward pause, every small success, they're all part of the process. So if you ever feel frustrated because you understand English but struggle to speak, don't tell yourself, "My English is bad." Instead, tell yourself, "My speaking skill is still growing." Because those are two very different things. The fact that you understand this podcast means something important. It means your English is already stronger than you think. Now your job is to help your mouth catch up with your mind. One conversation, one sentence, one day at a time. And before you realize it, speaking English won't feel like solving a puzzle anymore. It will simply feel natural. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next English podcast.